Welcome to part 2 with Annie Morrison, a living legend in many ways. And Annie, I have to ask, and I'm assuming you folks have already watched part 1, so we're up to speed on her life so far. What was your first big break?
Well, I went to the Burt Reynolds Jupiter Theaters, and I was a first-year apprentice of that program in '79. And you had to do 52 weeks to earn your card, or 5 equity shows, and I did both. He had Dinah Shore come on to do her Dinah Shore show. I don't know if you remember that, but she was still going on in the 70s into the 80s. Mm-hmm. And he had a whole week there, and he was showing off his apprentices. And when I got up, I did I Can Cook Too, which was a Leonard Bernstein song. I cook too, on top of the rest, my seafood's the best in town. And I could sing a high C then, and I did a high C, which was fun. And he said to her afterwards, he said, Annie Morrison is probably the one of all the group that's going to go to Broadway, and I bet she'll be there in a year. He was off 6 months. So I left there, I went to New York, and Burt Reynolds was down here in Florida. I'd come down to Florida, worked at the Oslo for about a year doing a children's tour, and then went over and did that. I went to New York, back again since '74 when I had done the...
Where was home at this point? What did you call home?
Well, I'd left Chicago, you know,
right.
And home was wherever I was next.
Okay.
You know, so I'd been in Florida for 2 years, and now I was back going up to New York and making it there. So I'd been working as a professional actor. My first off-Broadway, right away I got my first off-Broadway show. In a Dreamtime, it was this little 3-character piece. And got to work with people like Alfred Urey, who's the playwright, and Robert Waldman, who wrote this music. Which led me into my first regional play, which was a musical called Keystone, working with some actor by the name of Scott Bakula. And, you know, but I wanted to audition for the Hal Prince Stephen Sondheim musical, Merrily We Roll Along, which was in 1981. But I couldn't because I was too old. I was 25, and they were really looking for people between the ages of 16 and 20. So I gave up on that because I figured they'd already had cast it.
Sure.
And I went off to do the show, and was discovered. Joanna Merlin, the casting director, found out about me, and they had not gotten their Mary Flynn, the female lead, yet, and flew me down to audition for her. She insisted that Hal Prince see me. I tell that in a story, which I'll tell you about in a minute. I auditioned for him. He had me come back 2 weeks to sing for Stephen Sondheim, and at the end of that, Stephen Sondheim said, "I'll see you first day of rehearsal." It happened to be my birthday.
Wow.
So my
what
big
a birthday
break.
Present.
What a birthday present, huh?
Wow.
And so here I am, starring in a Stephen Sondheim musical. Hal Prince directed, George Firth, book writer. Ron Field, who had done Cabaret with them, was the choreographer, and it didn't do well. But it was the most magnificent experience. It was a master class in how to do musical theater development.
You learn from the best.
You learn from the best. And the friendships that we kept. I mean, we're over 40 years old. The show will not go away. We'll never see the incarnation of that year. George Firth and Stephen Sondheim wanted to continue trying to fix that. It was the end of the Hal Prince, Stephen Sondheim collaboration, unfortunately, until years later. Mm-hmm. And I got to be witness of when they announced they were going to go back together again, because it was in the reunion concert in 2002 that they got to see all of us again, do the original music. Too bad we couldn't do the original book, because George Firth had a hissy fit and wanted his newest version, and Steve said, no, we want to see the originals do the original. So by not having the book, it was very clear to Prince what the problem was. It was always the book.
Wow.
And but they
for
hugged each
folks
other.
at home who may not understand the term "the book,"
The book. It's the words that are said between the songs. You know, the story that happens. That's just the play.
That ties the
play. Yeah, we call it the book or the libretto. you know, if you want to get fancy schmancy. But it's the dialogue, it's the words that get said, it's the book part before you lead into the music.
And that was the problem with the show.
And the show was done backwards. The storytelling was done backwards. So Stephen Sondheim created a beautiful score that people say, oh, you know, it would fix it if you just did it forward. No. He brilliantly wrote it to go backwards. So you would have a pre-prise before a song instead of the reprise after.
Okay.
And it is of the two musicals that it's done all the time. It's Into the Woods and it's Merrily We Roll Along. You know, it's still a flawed show, but it's still done all the time. The music is the most accessible, and so we kept up those friendships. We still hang out. We still do stuff together. I've done Sondheim birthday celebrations. I worked with both Steve and Hal again on their musical called Gold, which later then became Bounce, which also didn't work well. Hal brought me back to do La Musique in New York. He wanted me to bring me back to Broadway. He wanted me to do Lottie Lenya, but because I didn't have a Tony Award, the producers decided it should be Donna Murphy. So they wrote me a role in there so I could be her understudy, and I got to go on, you know, and get to be that role. Hal was my Uncle Hal.
You were close to him.
Yeah, and Steve.
Yeah.
I would go into New York, and he said, come and have coffee in my office. He said, wait, let me put my hearing aids in. You're way too interesting. I want to hear your stories. He was a mentor. I would tell him the solo plays I was writing, do a bit somewhere in his office, and he'd say, Annie, you're such a brilliant writer. Keep writing, you know. Stephen Sondheim mentored my son in a musical, you know.
You can't get better mentors than that.
Mentors than that. So they've passed, and I was asked to come. I do lots of cabaret. I'm kind of like an expert in cabaret development, and I've been at 54 Below in New York, which is one of the top cabaret rooms in New York. Expensive room, but it's a top cabaret room, and they just won a Tony Award for doing theatrical pieces in their space. So they're hotsy-totsy, right?
Oh, yeah.
So back in December, Jennifer Tepper, who runs the room, said, Annie, I haven't gotten my solo cabaret acts up yet, and I thought I'd ask you first. And I said, well, I'd love to come back, or just coming out of COVID, sort of, you know. Maybe I'll come back in May. She said, yeah, you know. I said, well, I have this, you know, I show that I did back in 2018, my furniture set, which is, you know, storytelling that leads about the love for furniture, you know. And she said, that's great. Or you could do a Sondheim thing. I said, yeah, you know, blah, 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 shit. Or you could do a Sondheim thing. I said, Jennifer, do you want me to do a Sondheim thing? She said, yeah, I think you, because you're so good at it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, isn't New York sick of Sondheim? She said, honey, New York will never be sick of it. So I decided to write a particular show, which I thought I'd do one night only, for 54 Below. And it was my experience of being Mary Flynn in 1981. And I do the score of Merrily. Well, I have to do 75 minutes version of it. And a lot of storytelling. Yeah. It really is a solo. Pepper said it's really a theater piece and it's not a cabaret show. To which I say, really good cabaret is a theater piece.
Yeah.
So I did this night. I had Jason Alexander, who did the Broadway debut with me, you know, most of the Merrily folks that could be there, famous people in the audience, Broadway producers. One of them sat right front in the front row. I'm doing this piece. One of my funny lines is, and Broadway is community theater with a lot of money. The audience went nuts. The producer stood up and applauded. It got rave reviews. Producers want to bring me back. I was invited back to do 2 more performances. Yeah. Sold out again. I'm in talking with producers to bring it to an off-Broadway theater. A film company wants to film it as a special. Jonathan Groff, the actor, do you know who he is? You know who's did? Most people now would know him as King George in Hamilton.
Oh, sure,
he was in Glee.
Yeah,
he was in Spring Awakening. He's a wonderful actor. He came to see the show because he just got cast as Franklin Shepard in the new revival that they're doing at the New York Theater Workshop that's going to happen in December. And the Charlie Kringus is going to be played by Daniel Radcliffe, Harry Potter.
Wow.
With Linda Mendez, who's going to play my role, who's a fantastic actress. So I thought, what a fun. He's sitting in the audience. He said, Annie, you've got to do this for our company. there's talk that maybe I'll do it on their set. So if you want to know what's going on, yeah, I'm merrily, it will not leave my life.
Your life continues.
It continues
to merrily roll along.
And it's really a tip to Hal and a tip to Steve.
Absolutely. Well, and they tip their hats to you because you were able to bring what was in their minds and on paper to life.
Right.
You brought life to what they...
One of the reviewers for the Variety, when she was for Variety magazine, she talked to me, she said, she had done Merrily with me. She said, Annie, would you have done this show if Hal and Steve were still alive? And I said, I don't see why not. It just never occurred to me until now.
So you've had this amazing experience in New York and back and forth to New York. And then you come to Sarasota. You end up in why Sarasota?
Well, actually, I married Blake Walton, and we had a son by the name of Huck Walton. And we went out to California because I was noticing that the things that I was auditioning for in New York, and this is in the 80s, was now going to people with television credits. And I thought, I see what's going on here. In order to continue to work in New York, you have to have television credits. So we moved out there. I spent about 3 years there, and I was miserable. Television just didn't seem like my media. Mm-hmm. And an interesting thing at the time, a casting director said, whatever you do, don't show everything that you can do. In New York, you can do that. But in LA, and this is at the time, it's maybe different now, at the time, you only show one thing at a time and let them discover all the other things you could do when they're ready. Huh. And I didn't have the patience for that. You know, I had lots of things that I could do. And I had gotten involved with the National Dyslexia Research Foundation, being a dyslexian, and thought that I wanted to create a musical theater program for some population of people that could benefit from that, because I felt musical theater was a whole-brained experience. And my husband and I were going to split up. We loved each other so much that we decided to get a divorce. It just seemed like the most, and that's into the whole evening of stories. That's part 3.
Yeah, that's part 3.
But we did have a son by the name of Huckleberry and Huck, and I decided to come to Sarasota, Florida, because my parents had, I got them to retire here because of the arts here, wonderful arts community. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I'll land here for a little bit. I didn't want to go back to New York. And I took Huck so that Blake could explore himself in LA for a little bit, decide what we all wanted to do. We figured this all out. At the time, we just separated. And he decided 2 years later that he needed to be near his son. So he came down here, and this community allowed us to do all the things that we wanted to explore. It would be harder to do in New York. I wanted to create this musical theater program, and it ended up being with persons with developmental disabilities. Blake and I discovered how much we love solo theater. I was taking so much solo plays that I was writing and what have you, and that's another story about the Fairy Glen. We have to go out for drinks. I have so much to tell you.
We do, and you know what? Sorry, you guys, you stay at home.
Yeah, yeah. We're just going to continue talking.
Yeah. Would love to.
But yeah. So we got down here. We were allowed to direct. We were allowed to create these pieces.
Yeah.
I continued doing cabaret, developing. I had like 7 pieces of cabaret that I could do. I stayed for a little bit and then was planning to go back to New York. But I ended up back in Sarasota after Love Music did not do well, and the economy tanked in 2008. So my folks had died. I had now inherited the condo that I put my mom in before I left, all paid for, no mortgage, and I thought, this is where I hang my hat. I can go anywhere in the world, but I hang my hat here.
Was this the first time you ever felt like you had a place to hang your hat?
I guess so. I mean, I've been here since 90.
Yeah.
In and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. So it just made sense to just continue doing that.
One of my favorite questions, one of my favorite things, I love to interrupt my guests, but I'm teasing. I love to ask my guests, my new friends, what's a guilty pleasure?
What's a guilty pleasure? God, you have an hour?
You have many?
I don't know. A guilty pleasure. Wow, I've never thought of that before. I don't drink anymore. I stopped drinking. I love chocolate, but decided to chill out on chocolate. Guilty pleasure. I love to binge this is crazy. I love to binge solo artists. I will go all over the web trying to find people. Isn't that weird? I cannot get enough of them. I'm looking for them all the time. I find somebody and I say, "You got a solo play in you?" It's like I'm obsessed with it. It's like I can't get enough of your story. I want to know more about it. I guess if I could be alone, I would just constantly be doing that. Isn't that crazy? What a weird thing to want to be.
I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't determine your sanity or insanity, but I think it's wonderful that you want to engage and listen to. I think that's a guilty pleasure of mine also, is I love to hear people's stories.
Well, you're a journalist.
Yeah.
And you're a good storyteller, and you love to listen to story.
I do, and I love to help people tell their stories.
Exactly.
Everybody
we're
has
very
a story.
similar than you and I. We have a similar mission. We just explore it differently.
Yeah, we do.
I want to put them on stage to see if they can find the theatricality of it, and you're fine with just the purity of the story that it is, as it is.
It is, but to be able to help them develop it, but
Exactly.
the purity of it as a journalist.
Well, let's collaborate on something together. Wouldn't that be a fun thing to do?
I would love that.
All right, let's work
really
on
would.
that.
My life is just so dull, and
Oh,
I really
stick
don't
with me,
have
kiddo. We're
fun.
new friends now. I won't let you be dull anymore.
Actually, I've got so many things. I've got so many irons in the fire.
Or what's your guilty pleasure?
Oh, wait a minute. You have to sit over here to do that.
Okay, wait a minute. Oh, okay.
Grab your mic. If you're going to start talking to me.
Okay, all right.
All right.
All right, so
this is weird.
what I love to ask my guests is, what's your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure. Wow. My guilty pleasure is to be able to be at home alone with my dog, with some sort of comfort food meal that I've prepared, and an ice cold martini.
Excellent.
And to be able to just sit and have an evening to myself.
Wow, you know what I used to drink? I used to love dirty martinis.
Yeah. I like a good dirty joke myself.
Yeah, there you go. I'll do the dirty jokes and you do the martini.
Okay, let's go back to our original seats.
Okay, that was fun.
That was fun. Oh boy, did I feel awkward sitting there.
I didn't feel awkward at all.
Yeah, it's funny because my very first guest on Suncoast People was Linda Carson,
Oh, I
who
love
we both
her.
know and love, and I asked her, what it was like turning the tables, and now someone asked questions of you, and she was very open and, of course, had wonderful stories to tell. Are you ready to retire?
I don't think I'm able to. I don't think I'm able to retire. For an actor, when you're not working, you're retired. If something comes along. No, I don't know if I can. But I always have to be involved in this thing that we do. I think I'm supposed to be teaching this spring at the University of Southern California, 6 weeks of cabaret development class.
Wow.
So that might be what the next chapter of my life is, going around the country teaching that.
But you can't leave Sarasota.
Well, my hat's here.
There you go. What's your proudest achievement?
My son, Huck Walton. He just finished becoming the executive producer of the Music Man album, working with Hugh Jackman. And Jonathan Tunick, who was the arranger of that, was the arranger of all of Sondheim's musicals. So I first got to meet him on Merrily in 1981. What a sweet human being he is. He's about ready to retire if he can.
Yeah.
And what a joy to hear Huck say that Jonathan Tunick turned to him and said, "Huck, I will do any project you want. I absolutely enjoyed working with you." And it's a thrill to say, I am Huck Walton's mother.
That is
He's
beautiful.
a beautiful performer himself. But
That is beautiful.
kind and patient young man. He's got an interesting future ahead of him.
And now what's next?
See, one of my lines in my show is, I'm always on the brink of the next.
Uh-huh.
The next thing is Merrily from Center Stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited. Please come and see it.
If you get me a ticket, I'll fly up and see it.
Sure.
Or I'll sit backstage. Applaud from there. Annie Morrison, I can't thank you enough for being here. And I want to thank you for watching, and hopefully you got to see both episodes, both parts of my interview with Annie Morrison.
Yeah, because we're now old. We're going to be old friends before you know it.
Oh, honey, I'm already old. that part's already established. But I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for the emails you send in to info@suncoastpeople.com. I'm Robert Tim, and thanks for watching. Suncoast People depends on people like you. If you like what we're doing, consider supporting us through patreon.com/Suncoast People. And thanks for watching.